Hello and welcome to the next Elemental Hit update video. So I've crafted a couple of pieces of gear. My gear isn't fully finished yet. It's almost to that point where I'm no longer making upgrades. But I thought I'd make a video because I had a couple of people asking me how to craft certain upgrades, stuff like that, since they've managed to farm some money and are looking to upgrade their build. So I thought I'd go over it. So before we begin, there's two things about Eli Hit. So there's the traditional way of just going full damage and not caring about life and just dying pretty much every other map, depending on the content you're doing, of course. But then usually you can achieve probably around 50 to 60 mil shaper DPS, but you will have about 3.2k life. So I decided to drop some damage in certain slots and just go for a lot more life. So currently I have 4.5k life with about 21 mil shaper DPS, which is more than enough to clear everything already. I've been doing my Cyrus 9 and Conquerors and stuff like that with about 9 to 10 mil shaper DPS. So it's pretty comfortable with 20 mil, I would say. And this isn't even the finished gear. Once I finish, I add the finishing touches, which isn't much anymore. The goal is to have about 5k life and about 30 mil shaper DPS. Which I much rather have 5k life with 30 mil DPS than 3k life with 50 or 60 mil. Since once you're at the high end of DPS, the marginal increases. Having 30 mil or 60 mil, it's only a matter of seconds that you spend on a boss, so it's really not that big of a deal. And I much rather have a nicer character that's more tanky than the standard bow user nowadays. So with that being said, let's go over the gear. Before going over my gear, I also want to quickly mention the debate of buying items versus crafting them, since in the past pretty much everyone will always advise you to craft yourself because it's cheaper and there's too big of margins when people try and sell finished items. Now I actually want to argue that this league it might be better for a lot of people to just buy finished items straight up, so first of all, this league crafting is less deterministic than it was last league, for example. It still is pretty deterministic, but there are certain cases where you kind of have to get lucky or you risk having a bricked item, basically. So with that already being the case, on top of that, crafting is pretty expensive. I mean, I've been throwing so much money. Awakened Orbs are like 4 to 4.5x, Maven Orbs are almost 3x alt each try. Then of course you have to roll the item with double influence mods, which costs quite a bit. So a lot of cases I was spending like 20 to 30x just to get to the point of slamming my items together with an Awakener Orb with double Maven items. And then of course you still have to hit a good other suffix and stuff like that and finish the item. So it's almost to the point where finished crafted items aren't that much more expensive than what it would take you on average to hit. And of course you have the benefit that you're buying exactly what you want. And then there's of course the time it takes to craft and everything. The time quickly adds up as well. So you could spend that time just farming money and buying the finished product instead. So this league, I think it's a lot better than previous leagues to just buy finished items rather than just crafting yourself. So if you don't like crafting or you don't like the RNG and just trying out stuff, there's definitely a good case to just farm for currency and buy finished items. But for the people that want to craft or want to see how about they can make upgrades themselves, I'll quickly go over each piece of gear. I don't want to spend too much time on it because most of this it's pretty much the same as other leagues. Not much has changed in terms of crafting, so I'll quickly go over it. So the first, my bow, I pretty much got quite lucky hitting this at the start of the league and I haven't really changed it. So you just want to spam Essence of Rage for the fire pen until you hit either a high tier of fire damage or +2 to socket at level of bow jumps. At that point, if you have an open prefix, you want to either do prefix can be changed and veiled Chaos Orb and then unveil the pen like I did here, or you can do cannot roll caster and just slam it with an exalt and you will hit +1. So there's quite a few variations of the bow you can hit. All of them are good. Having +2 arrows fractured is very important, of course, and then after that you can just do prefix can be changed and reforce speed till you get some attack speed and just craft crit chance qual. You could also go for either a expert crit chance and craft double damage. I haven't fully POB'd yet, the best case scenario, but any bow is pretty much good, something like this, so there's that. So I've recorded this a couple times and I keep going over all the crafts and all the outcomes possible and how to save the items and stuff like that, and it just ended up dragging on way too long, and if I had to do it for every piece the video would be like a couple hours long, so I decided instead to just go over my items and how I crafted them. And if you ever try and craft the same item and you get stuck at a certain step, you can always PM me and I'll try to tell you how to proceed. But But for now, so my chest, I went for elevated attack rate and elevated minus mana cost. I really wanted them elevated. Of course, the attack rate is the strongest mod and the minus mana cost. With my setup, it's literally free if my LA hit, so I don't have to worry about mana at all. My single target obviously costs mana because it's not in my chest. But when you're using your single target, you're constantly leeching, so you have no mana issues at all. So I awakened the Orb together, and I got extremely lucky and hit tier 1 all-res. So that's best case scenario basically. At that point, the plan was to do suffix can be changed to Reforged Caster for +1 curse, and then you would do suffix can be changed again, and then you aceling it for 50-50. So you might have to repeat that until you get +1 curse and a failed mod, and then you would unveil avoid ailments and craft 85 life, and the chest would be done, and you'd have your ailment immunity, 85 life, and it's done. But the first try, the suffix can be changed Reforged Caster, and I hit tier 3 life. Now at that point I didn't really want to gamble the aceling anymore on chest and decided to just get avoidance on my boots instead. So I just finished crafting it with life, but ideally you would have avoid on your chest because then you can get onslaught boots. So my boots, since I had to get avoidance here, and the other option was to get a ring with an implicit that's 25% avoid, but then you would also have to take these 2 nodes here to finish, and instead I thought I'd just drop my onslaught boots and just go for avoid boots instead. So I basically got avoid ailments, which is shaper boots, and then tailwind hunter, awaken ornament together. Now I had an open suffix here, and I did suffix can be changed to reforge cold, which guarantees cold res. And then I got again really lucky on these, which I hit tier 1 cold res. Then my suffixes were done, and then I just did suffix can be changed veiled chaos orb to hit the movement speed and craft life. Now the plan was to get unaffected by poison, but it was just going to be way too expensive. Maybe I'll do it later in the league, but for now I just have an open prefix, because ideally you want to do suffix can be changed, and then I haven't calculated the cost, but you would either do Reforged Chaos, which guarantees, well, you have a 50-50 to hit Desecrated Ground, but the issue is you have to elevate it, which you need 2 influence mods there, so it's quite pricey to already get 2 influence mods on there. Then you have to hit the Maven Orb, which is a 50-50. Then even if you hit the Maven Orb, you have to do suffix can be changed again and aceling it, which is another 50-50. And then you have to unveil movement speed and craft life. But I thought it was just a way too pricey of a process to get unaffected by poison on them. So for now they're just like this, which is really GG boots still. So next up, so obviously Headhunter, Byron, Zal's Blood haven't changed. I did upgrade my Zal's Blood to get better rolls on that since I saw one listed. But then the Quiver, so the Quiver, what you want to do is you want to get a Spike 1 Quiver, ideally item level 86, so you have a chance to hit tier 1 elemental damage with attacks. And then you just want to reforge attack is what I did. I have a couple quivers I was rolling. You just reforge attack until you hit +1 arrow and then either life or elemental damage with attacks, or both. Any tier, the tier doesn't matter at the start. And if you just hit 1 and an open prefix, you can craft the other one, which also works. And then once you have those 3 mods, you would at harvest do this craft, reforge rare, being much more likely to receive the same modifier types, which has a good chance to just keep the same mods but give you back higher tiers. So once you do that enough, you will end with something like this. You have +1 arrow, tier 2 life, and tier 2 elemental damage with attacks. Of course, you can have tier 3, tier 4 even, you know, depending on how good of a quiver you want to start with. At that point, ideally you have an open suffix. If you don't, you have to do reforge, keeping all prefixes until you have one. Then you craft on prefix can be changed and a reforge crit. Now, the ideal case scenario is that you hit a high tier of crit multi, because then once you hit crit multi, you would do prefix can be changed again and aceling it for a 50-50. And then on the unveil, you could unveil crit chance with elemental damage hybrid, which is the best case scenario. And then you craft attack speed and you have a lot of damage on your quiver. But me, after a couple of tries, I hit tier 1 crit chance, which I decided to just stay with and drop the multi. Then I crafted, well, at first I blocked and exalted it, since I was going to have an open suffix, I may as well exalt it. And I hit the tier 1 res. Now again, ideally you would have crit multi on your quiver, it's a lot of damage. But I just felt like this was way too good to roll over, so I decided to keep it, since even getting the res on here just gave me another res roll that I could work it on my ring instead, and I just crafted attack speed. So next is the helm. So the helm, you want a Blizzard Crown. Now, I don't have an enchant since there was none listed with an enchant on the market, but also it's not too expensive to get a lab runner to run the helm for you to get you elemental hit attack speed. So it's not that expensive. It's like 3 or 4 exalts only, so it's actually very cheap. So I'm eventually gonna get a lab runner to run my helm for the enchant. Or the better enchant, the Sniper's Mark Curse effect, but I think they charge more for that since a lot more people want that enchant. But for crafting the helm, so basically you just get elevated minus fire res and elevated increased elemental damage taken, and you can roll them together. Now in my case, I had a tier 4 resist with it, which is definitely not bad, but it's not ideal. So ideally you have an open suffix, or you just hit crit multi to begin with. And if you have an open suffix, you can do suffix can be changed and reforge crit, which is a good chance to give you a high tier of crit multi, which is ideally what you want on your helm. Now again, I did 2 attempts. I have another helm somewhere as well. This was the other attempt. Unfortunately, I had attribute requirements on it. So ideally you have multi on your helm, but again, I got resist, and maybe I'll craft another one. I think I'm gonna try and save this one with non-influence to influence and try and get crit on it and craft this one out instead. But for now, this is the helm that will do. And the prefixes, I basically hit hybrid life, and I decided to craft life and just a lot of life. But eventually, if you do have crit multi, you want to reforge for elemental damage on one of the prefixes and then craft life. You can maybe even get an Aceling Maul on there as well for +1 gems. But for now, this is the helm. I'll probably craft this one out instead and switch it out, so this is still a work in progress, but you definitely want those 2 elevator mods on there and some life. Next up is the gloves. So the gloves, you definitely want elevated intimidate, since the non-elevated is only 10% chance on hit, so it's very strong. +1 frenzy does not have to be elevated. The elevated doesn't really help us at all as a raider. You just awaken orb those together, and this was my 3rd or 4th pair of gloves, and I hit tier 3 life, which is really good. So ideally you either have to get lucky and hit life, or you hit an open prefix, and then you can do prefix can be changed and reforge life, and hope that you hit a decent tier of life. But that's your prefixes. Now you have a couple of options. So as you can see, these gloves are item level 77. So ideally what you do is you start with a level 75 to 77 warlord base with grip gloves to roll the frenzy on, and then you awaken orb another pair of gloves with intimidate, which requires item level 85, but you can still slam it on another item with awaken orb, so that doesn't respect the item level, since the main benefit of having a lower item level is that if you want to roll for culling strike on these, it's a lot easier than trying to roll for culling on an item level 85 pair. So keep that in mind. But with tier 3 life, I mean, it's really strong, but it's very expensive to roll for culling strike, and I would only do it if I had tier 1 life. So for now, I just decided to do Veiled Chaos Orb at the time to get the crit chance elemental damage, and then I just crafted something, and again, same concept as a quiver. I was gonna have an open suffix, so I thought I may as well slam it, so I blocked Dex, I think. Slam mana again on kill, which is really useless, but for now these are the gloves. Now I plan to recraft this, and the plan is to just do prefix can be changed, reforce speed until I had a decent tier of attack speed, then again prefix can be changed, aceling them to get the crit chance with elemental damage, and then I can craft a resist on here, which will relieve some pressure of the little bit of res I need on my ring currently. So again, these are probably going to get recrafted as well. Basically they're just going to add a resist to them, and instead of the mana again on kill, and the rest will stay the same. The last piece is your ring. I actually did just buy my Watcher's Eye, so I went for crit multi and attack speed, so I'm about to fit this in for quite a bit of extra damage and life. But either way, so your ring, the reason I leave this last is it should be your last slot, because you always want to get anything else you need on your ring. So for me this is just a temporary ring for now, while I'll fix some of my other gear. So for example, I have 11 cold res here. I actually just needed a tiny bit of cold res. I also went for fire res implicit, since again I needed some fire res, but once I redo my gloves I won't need any res. I also have some accuracy on here, which is to reach hit cap, which I'm not quite sure yet how I'm gonna get the accuracy. I mean, these 3 nodes are really worth, and depending once I get a couple of extra levels as well, we'll see what I do with accuracy. Maybe I'll still need it on my ring as well. And then int, and then most people, almost always you will get int on your ring, since if you want to use LE focus or any other blue gems, you will need the int. So you want the big int roll. Now for most people you'll probably go for a ring like this. This is my old ring, because you will need a lot of resists on your ring, together with int. And then of course your prefixes, you want life, elemental damage and attacks. And then like this one for example, if you have an open prefix you can get the minus mana cost as well, which is really nice. So these are the ideal prefixes. And then your res, you will have your suffixes, sorry, you will have int, and then the implicit and your other two suffixes is basically what you need the most. So if you're like me and you got really lucky with tier 1 resists on basically all your gear, and a little bit of res on my helm as well, you won't need much res on your ring. So eventually I would change this ring out. If I don't need res at all, I'm gonna go for either a curse on hit implicit, or just percent life, or some damage, like some cool implicit with centering. And then my suffixes will most likely be crit multi, int, and either if I need accuracy, and if I don't need accuracy, I'll go for some damage there as well. And then the prefixes will be the same, so elemental damage attack, life, and minus mana cost. That's the ideal case scenario, so I'm still looking forward to crafting a new ring. So next is the skill tree, which is pretty standard. So still have the large cluster here, didn't really change anything with the skill points, pressure point and quick getaway medium clusters. And then I added a medium cluster here actually, pressure point and quick getaway, and I removed this section and padded through here. Now, and there is an argument to get a second large cluster with another medium, gives you a lot more damage, but I will go for that once I'm like level 98 or 99, since currently I don't think I have enough skill points to merit that change. I had some extra skill points and I just took these 2 life nodes and then these 2 nodes for life. And I still have this extra life node as well, since again I'm trying to build more life than you usually do. But if you want to go full glass cannon, you can drop these 2 points, these 2, and even this one, and already pick up your large cluster. But even then, maybe you just go for here a 4-point jewel socket for some damage. But that's that. Also, most likely you will have to take this node for the resists, since you will need them. But the rest of the skill tree is pretty much the same. Synesthesia is obviously the same. The skill gems, so elemental damage attacks, barrage, LE hits, LE focus, hypothermia and inspiration. My current 6 link for a single target. I went for anomalous here for the crit chance. Whereas my clear, I got LE hits, elemental damage, divergent inspiration, mirage archer, awakened chain, and combustion. So I went divergent here because it gives reduced mana cost. So this being divergent together with the ring craft and the body craft, my LE hit is free, so I don't need any mana for my clear skill, which is just really nice. There's also, I'm using combustion in the clear setup. I know there's like a split here. You could use combustion linked here with your way of conviction. Now, I think this is a lot nicer if you're still using Asna's chant. You can fit it in, but ideally you just put it on your clear setup. It actually gives you more damage since you don't use GMP, but using GMP could be nicer as well. I guess combustion is definitely the stronger option to use in your clear setup, but if you just really like to play with GMP, there is a scenario where you could change it and just put this on your way of conviction instead. So here, since we dropped the Asna's chant, we have Arcanist Brand, Flame Ability, Wave of Conviction, and Sniper's Mark. If I do get a Flame Ability on ring, I will put Power Charge on crit here, just to get some power charges with Wave of Conviction. So that will be the change there. And then we just have Precision, Anger, Skitterbolt, and Enlighten. So just level their Precision as high as you can. And of course, to get hit cap, you don't necessarily need 100%, but you know, the higher percent, the better, of course. And then the other, we still have cast on that portal, even though I'm not dying that much anymore, but depending on the content I do, I just like this. I mean, sometimes I will just straight up suicide because I can't be bothered to open a portal scroll. And then I have Steel Skin and Dash, so movement skill. Still debating to change this to Flame Dash. I'm not that big of a fan of Dash, especially with only 1 charge. But there's that, and then Steel Skin just on left click. So I think I've covered everything. I mean, Pantheon. Basically don't really look at this too often, but yeah, I have the Chaos Damage one here, which reminds me of Flasks, since I did get Poison Immunity on one of the Flasks. Still using Quicksilver. I did put in Dying Sun. Even with the changes, I think this is still very strong, especially if you use the enchant used when you hit a rare or unique, if not already in effect. If you do juiced maps, this will basically always use because there's so many rares in the map. And it's not too bad, especially if you're still using Overflowing Chalice. You get charges back really fast, so this is up quite a long time. together with this. Now the overflowing chalice, I do like it for mapping a lot, but eventually I will change it for a bald fate, since a bald fate will give me something like 4 or 5 million shaper DPS, so it's pretty insane. So eventually I will change that. But for now, this is the build. Like I said, a couple of small changes still I'm going to be making to reach my 5k life goal and about 30 mil shaper DPS. So there might be a part 4, but it might take a couple of days still. Still working on challenges and stuff like that. So I'll see you in the next one. Hope you enjoy. Quickly, actually, I will give a couple of tips since I do see some people struggling on damage. Now, the main things you really want to look for is your hit chance. You want this really high. If you're not using a headhunter, you have a searching eye jewel in your Stygian Vice. You can get accuracy on that to help you cap your hit chance. The other important thing is your crit chance and crit multi. My crit multi is actually not that high. It's pretty high still, but it's not that high. It can definitely get higher. So these two are a big part of your damage. So you want high crit chance and high crit multi. The majority of ways to get crit multi, so of course your quiver, you can have it. Maybe your helm and your ring, maybe, but those are harder, but definitely your quiver. And the other big part is your jewels. So you can see my jewels here. I have a lot of crit multi on them. And this one is triple multi. So jewel sockets is definitely where you get a lot of damage from. Eventually I will get life on most of my jewels, just to boost my life pool, but this is a big part of your damage. So make sure you have those few things checked off, and that will definitely help a lot with your damage. The other thing is curses, so you will always use Sniper's Mark. If you have a second curse on your body armor, you can also use Flame Ability, but only do this if you have a second curse here. Else, if you're using 2 curses without an extra curse, you will override your Sniper's Mark, which is actually damage loss at that point instead of just using a curse. So make sure you have 2 curses if you want to use Flame Ability. If not, just use Sniper's Mark. And that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed. Any questions, just let me know, and peace.